Joining me now, Senator Eric Schmitt. Welcome to the Alec Lace Show.
It's great to be with you.
It's an honor to have you here, and I know that the B-2 bombers took off from Missouri, which had to make you guys prideful over there. Did you have a chance to talk to any of the pilots or any of that, or how did you feel about them coming out of Missouri there?
Yeah, no, we're really proud. I've been to Whiteman several times. It's a pretty incredible place where the B-2s fly out of, and they're just courageous men and women. You've got the pilots, you've got the maintainers, you've got a whole unit there that prepares for something like this. They never know when they're going to get the call. They're part of the nuclear triad, so it's an important piece of our national defense. And I just think it's kind of remarkable what they pulled off. If you put it in context, you had a couple go to Guam as sort of a deflection, and then you had the others headed east. They refuel a few times in the air, not detected, no signal intelligence. Drop those bunker busters from high altitude on something the size of this desk. And accomplish their mission of taking out Iran's nuclear program and get home safely. So it's it may be the most secretive and sort of, I guess, mission maybe we've ever seen. There were no leaks about it, and their execution on it was incredible, really.
It's amazing what we have at our disposal, especially, I have four kids. I have a 19-year-old, an 18-year-old, and I can only imagine these young pilots, what they were capable of. Sometimes we don't give this younger generation some credit, but we have some amazing young men and women that are capable of incredible things here. And sometimes we look at it, we say, I don't know how this generation is going to make it, but when you see things like this get pulled off, it gives you some faith and some hope.
That's right. And we're going to get them. I talked to President Trump about this. We're going to get them over to the White House and make sure they're recognized for that just incredible feat. That and the thing about it is they train for this, but you never know when something like this is going to happen. So their ability to be ready and actually execute like great airmen is just pretty remarkable, like I said.
And of course, all undermined by the fake news media trying to take away the
Right.
success of the mission. And Trump and Hegseth today just absolutely blasted them for that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, look, they obliterated this program. We've got another intelligence briefing with Secretary Hegseth and Secretary Rubio and John Ratcliffe later today. Actually, we'll get more details, but Israeli intelligence has already been public about it. Even the Iranians have indicated that. So this is they had a specific mission, they had a specific goal to wipe out and obliterate that nuclear program, and they did it. And again, we're probably the only country in the world who could have pulled that off, and we were able to do it. So yeah, I think it's just sort of another kind of example of Trump derangement syndrome. They just can't, the Democrats and the legacy media aligned with them, they just can't give any credit here. And in many ways, they root against the country at every turn, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah, it's sad to see. But also later today, I know Trump is going to be having a thing going on at the White House about the big, beautiful bill. And this is all the talk of the town. I know for you guys down there, especially. Yeah. Well, first, I want to hit on this rescission package. I've heard you speak a lot about it. I mean, this is something we've all been waiting for. So what's your take? What do we expect to see in this rescission package here?
Yeah, so to kind of just sort of set the stage here. You've got the reconciliation package that deals with mandatory spending. So there's going to be reforms there, but that's also a place where you're going to have, money for border security and deportations, money for our military, the no tax on tips, the no tax on overtime, the extending the tax cuts so middle-class families, make sure they have that tax relief. That's on the mandatory and tax side. Then you have on the discretionary spending side, this rescissions package. And you've got, of course, then on the appropriations process that happens further down the road. So we'll hopefully have wrapped up the reconciliation process, and then in mid-July, because there's a sort of a shot clock for us to do this, I'll be handling that rescissions package that deals with some of the most wasteful spending we've seen that's identified by DOJ. About $9.4 billion worth of spending, whether it's NPR, which is a totally left-wing organization. You've got the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which is overwhelmingly has anti-Republican messaging and programming. And then you have some of the USAID programs that people become aware of, like, Sesame Street in Iraq and DEI trainings in Burma and sex change operations in Guatemala, all this crazy stuff that you can't believe your tax dollars are going to fund. We're funded. So the rescissions package then takes that money out as we get leaner and I think a little bit meaner here at the federal level.
And the Democrats are working overtime with the fake news to try to make this sound like, oh, USAID, you're taking away money. Children are dying from it. They're trying to go overboard on all this stuff. And it's like the American taxpayers are seeing where our money is going. And we're saying, wait a second, not only should this be cut out and wiped out of our spending, but also somebody I think should be held accountable for mishandling all these funds and manipulating where all that money is going, because who knows where that money was really going? Because you know as well as I do, it don't cost like 40 million to put a gay Sesame Street in Iraq. So that money was going somewhere else.
That's right. Well, you're already seeing, I think, one indictment from some of these NGOs. And by the way, it sort of highlights this really kind of permanent Washington connection with these left-wing NGOs that help fuel mass migration. They help fuel censorship. And we're just beginning, quite frankly, to uncover what that was all about. This is the low-hanging fruit, but we ought to be relentless. In fact, I chair a subcommittee on the Judiciary Committee. We're going to continue to look at these NGOs because this is your tax money going to fund organizations that wanted to silence you when you were speaking out against mask mandates or questioning the efficacy of the vaccine or had something to say about Joe Biden or the Hunter Biden laptop. This is all part of the same network. And people go in and out of government to the nonprofit on the left-wing side. And we've got to put an end to it. We've got to make sure it never happens again. But this is kind of the nexus, I think, of the left-wing advocacy that has to be totally exposed. And so part of that is taking the money away, which is what we're going to do here.
And that is what they've done. They've used the media to manipulate the minds of the people to get you thinking in a certain direction, especially now with the big, beautiful bill. Their big talking point is Medicaid. They keep repeating the line over and over again. This is taking away Medicaid from the elderly people. I mean, I don't know how many times I've heard the record try to get straightened down on this, but they are still running with the story. You hear them on CNN constantly saying, but the big, beautiful bill is going to wipe out Medicaid for all these senior citizens and all that stuff. What is the truth about what's in the Medicaid? Who's going to lose the Medicaid in this big, beautiful bill?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question because this is one of the biggest lies they continue to tell. And they know it's a lie, but they think it's going to help them politically. The truth of the matter is there's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse in the Medicaid system. And it takes away, by the way, from the people who was originally designed to help. Pregnant moms, poor kids, and individuals with disabilities, right? That's what that program was originally supposed to be for. And this money that they continue to waste on, by the way, 1.4 million illegal immigrants. They would lose benefits. The American people are behind us for that, but they would lose benefits. And then there would be a work requirement. If you're an able-bodied adult and you're receiving that benefit, you should have a work requirement, and that's what's in this bill. And then there's additional eligibility checks to make sure only the people who are eligible would be getting it. So illegal immigrants are the only group that's going to lose taxpayer funded benefits here. And then if you're on it, we got to make sure there's a work requirement. That's the truth. So all this other stuff is just nonsense to try to, sway, I guess, independent voters that this is something that they shouldn't support. But I think once people know that that's not true and all of the things that are going to benefit them, there's school choice provisions in here. Again, it would prevent a $2,000 tax increase on the average American household if we don't get this done. So there's a lot of important things in here, including funding border security and deportations.
It's hard to believe, Senator, that was ever a thing where illegal immigrants could get Medicaid or illegal immigrants could get health care. Like, how I don't even know how that came. How did that even become a thing that has to be, taken out? I mean, how did we get to the point where we're giving illegals health care when we have people on the street with no coverage?
That's right. That's right. Well, we're just talking about military men and women, right? The veterans who don't have coverage, but somehow we were putting up illegal immigrants in four-star hotels in New York and make sure they had every taxpayer benefit under the sun. This is the legacy of Joe Biden. This is what they did. So you had President Autopen there surrounded by a cadre of left-wing radicals who wrote white papers about open borders, who were then literally opening our borders up to anybody. No vetting. You've got national security risk because of it. 15 to 20 million people came here illegally in 4 years, and that was the plan. That was ultimately what they wanted to do. They want to reshape the electorate. They want to make sure they get more electoral votes. You don't have to be a citizen to be counted in the census. That is exactly what they're trying to do. And you didn't need any new laws. You just needed a new president to enforce the laws. And now we have literally like 0 gotaways per month. It's pretty remarkable what President Trump's done. But the next phase of that is mass deportation. So you have to meet mass migration with mass deportations. Otherwise, this could happen again. So that's the goal here. But yeah, it happened because Joe Biden and his team around him wanted it to happen.
And it's the number one reason why Trump won in such a dominating fashion in November was that you have taxpayers watching illegals getting free phones, free healthcare, free housing, and we're saying, what are we doing here? This something is radically wrong. And to your point, where the Medicaid takes away from the people who need it by giving it to these illegals. It's the same thing with regular car insurance, home insurance. It's the people that are creating the fraud that are jacking up the prices for the regular people. We see that even in the military with the VA, the people that have manipulated. I had Secretary Collins on here. He's going through all those backlogs. You have people that are manipulating that system. They heard it for the guys that really need the benefits. And we're seeing the same thing with the Medicare when you have all these illegals jumping on it.
That's exactly right. And that's what happens. I mean, you saw the amount of spending that increased under Joe Biden and the things that they wanted to be able to do with that money is just really it's the most radical administration that we've ever seen. My previous job, when I was Attorney General of Missouri, we fought back against a lot of that stuff. We won on the vaccine mandate. We won on the student loan debt forgiveness case. Remember, that was another $500 billion just because he thought he could sign it away, evidently with an auto pen. We thought with a pen at the time. All of this debt for people. A theater professor at an Ivy League school thought he could have his debt forgiven by the truck driver who works his ass off all day long, right? So this is the mindset of the modern Democrat Party. And all you need to know, like this isn't, so all of the sort of like, post-mortem that they did after they got, stomped at the polls in November about how they were going to be different. Guess what just happened? They elected this literal communist in New York City, or they're about ready to elect this communist. Certainly the Democrats, he won the primary. So they haven't learned their lessons. I don't think they've hit rock bottom yet, but the good news is President Trump won in that landslide. We've got Republican House, Republican majority, and we want to try to fix some of the problems that were created over the last 4 years.
Well said. And the grandstanding and the political theater that they're putting on about blocking these ICE agents, blocking. Now you had the Supreme Court that ruled in favor of Trump that he could deport these illegals to any country that's going to accept them. And you have an actual federal judge that's saying, I'm not going to listen to the Supreme Court. Now, when they thought Trump was doing that, they said he's a dictator. But now this guy's doing it. He's a hero. So you can't. It's like, which side is it? Is it okay to defy the Supreme Court or is it not? When Joe Biden said, hey, the Supreme Court said I can't pay off your college tuition, but I'm going to do it anyway. Oh, yeah. We love that guy. But now with Trump, they think it's something different. But the grandstanding in the political theater from the Democrats has been up like tenfold since the ICE deportations.
That's right. Every accusation is an admission by them. I'm on the Judiciary Committee, and every judicial nominee or appointment that the president had, the Democrats asked that same question. Are you going to defy the law? Are you going to listen to court precedent? And literally the guy that all of them voted on and pushed through in the closing days of the Biden administration, this judge in Massachusetts was the one who actually gave a middle finger to the Supreme Court when they said, no, you actually have to move forward with these deportations. Now, he's ultimately going to get slapped down again, but it just goes to show you, they don't really believe this stuff. They don't believe it because it's all just about raw power. That's it. If COVID taught us anything, it's that the Democrats will maximize all the power that you let them have, even power that they never actually had, to, whether it's censor Americans or force them to, have a vaccine passport. The future was pretty bleak, but I think we're on the other side of that fever dream with President Trump, and we're going to appoint a lot more law and order judges on the bench. But yeah, I think the other thing that's worth noting, a lot of these cases, these district court judges have kind of had their 15 minutes of fame, but as they make their way through the courts, these cases, just like with the Supreme Court on the case that you're mentioning, President Trump, by and large, is going to be successful. It's frustrating when you see those individual decisions, but at the end of the day, he's going to be able to do the things that he ran on.
And it shows the only real audience that they have, or their target audience, is people who have the Trump derangement syndrome, the people who hate Trump, because they can get him to go along with anything. Because we've seen Barack Obama deport. They called him the deporter in chief. Deported over 5 million, 75% of which got no due process, and he's their favorite president. But right. Trump is doing it at a smaller scale, and they're saying, "Oh my God, look what this guy!" And they're actually like standing there defending these people that are murderers, that are rapists. Even I was in the press briefing there with Caroline Levin when she read out some of these crimes, and the media, it washes right over the media there. They don't even care. They can care less about what these people done. They want them to stay here in America, and you can't figure out like whose side are you on? Do you hate the American citizen that much?
Right. Well, and it's a totally misplaced idea of who the victim is, right? They don't identify with the young woman who's kidnapped and murdered. They want some, Venezuelan gang member to be able to be here indefinitely and not deported. That's pretty sick. actually. But that's kind of where they're at. You're right. Obama deported a bunch of people. Bill Clinton deported millions of people. But when President Trump does it, all of a sudden it's sort of a crime against humanity. They've completely lost any semblance of reality. But the good news is we have immigration laws that when they're enforced, that's exactly because look, the truth of the matter is until the last 4 years, immigration law in this country was if you come here illegally, you are detained. If you have a valid reason for staying, which is very narrow, like asylum claims, which 9 out of 10 are bogus, you might get to stay. But if not, you are deported. That's it. There's no like you get to be here and you're released and you get to stay and you get a court date and sometime in the 2030s. That's what the Biden administration was doing. That's an aberration of, U.S. law. So Trump's just bringing it back to the center here where it should have always been, but they're losing their minds over it because ultimately they have a real problem with America. You've got this kind of cultural Marxism that's seeped into not just universities, but the K through 12 obsession they have with critical race theory or whatever it is, DEI, where every room's divided by oppressor and oppressed, and that's how they view every situation, right? And so unfortunately, they don't know how to get back on track. Hopefully, again, the voters will continue to recognize this and punish them at the polls because they're completely out of touch.
Yeah, and nowhere does this boggle my mind more. And I gotta get you out of here. But you mentioned the communist that's getting elected there for the Democrat Party in New York City. The liberals seem to hate the nuclear family. They want to crush the patriarchy, but somehow they're okay with this Sharia law. The women are more oppressed in that Islamic culture than anywhere else on the planet. Yet somehow the liberals are like, no, this is what we want. We're okay with that. But if you have a wife who stays home with raise the children, she's oppressed.
Right. Well, it's the same sort of hypocrisy or cognitive dissonance, I guess, when you have a Queers for Palestine,
Right. Yeah.
sign and you're marching around, right? Like it makes no sense. Like it makes no sense. If you're gay and you're around Hamas, you're going to get thrown off a building. So this is just a totally insanity. But this is where they're at.
Yeah, it's wild to see. All right, last thing here. Give me a guesstimate on the timeline. When do you expect the big beautiful bill to get voted on in the Senate here and go back to the House?
Sometime this weekend. We'll be here, and we've got to get through some of the procedural hurdles, and we're still, internally trying to figure out. Like some of the SALT stuff is kind of ridiculous that they've got, quadrupled the SALT deduction to subsidize some of the policies of Pritzker and Newsom. We got to rein that in. So there's still some things that are going to play out in the next day or so here. But I think ultimately we're going to get there. Everybody wants to be able to deliver on President Trump's promises and the policies they're going to, sort of put working families front and center. So I think we'll get there. And my hope is, and I think it'll be this weekend.
What last thing? What is the AI part of this? I know there's been a lot of talk. I'm not really familiar with it. There's an AI thing. We won't be able to regulate AI. Do you know what this is all about that's in there?
Yeah, I think there's a real debate going on right now about what the best way to sort of make sure that some of the actors that have desires to, whether it's a censorship regime or, sort of privacy issues, it gets in the wrong hands. So they're having a debate about that, about the best way to approach that. What does that look like? Is it the federal level or the state level? But making sure that you're sort of out of the way and you don't inhibit people's rights. Because I filed the Missouri versus Biden lawsuit that dealt with this vast censorship enterprise. I certainly don't want to see those kind of same actors have the ability to censor Americans again. So that's kind of where it's at.
Gotcha. All right, Senator Eric Schmitt, and my time is up. It's an honor to have you on the podcast. Love to have you on again down the line. Thanks for joining me today and giving me a few minutes of your time.
We'll do it. Thanks.